Shalom, everyone. Hello. Let me see, is my mic working right now? Testing, testing. Hello. Well, someone will comment and let me know. Give me a one if you could hear me. Shalom, everyone, and welcome to Exploring the Motherland on this March 21st, 2025. As you all know, for some of you, if this is your first time, this is Exploring the Motherland, and the purpose of Exploring the Motherland is to promote the mission of Quest to Unite Africa. The mission of Quest to Unite Africa is to promote economic development and critical infrastructure for the continent of Africa and the African diaspora. We do this through our four main strategies that would be business, cultural engagement, medicine, and technological innovation. The purpose of this show is to convey the need for Quest Unite Africa and the mission we are trying to promote. This show presents current news developments and things on the continent and why we are needed. So without further ado, first story. Niger orders 3 Chinese oil officials out of country, sources says. And I will always put the link to the article in the chat. And the article reads, Niger junta has ordered 3 Chinese officials working in the oil sector to leave the country. 2 sources familiar with the decision told Reuters on Friday in the latest move by regional military governments to assert greater control over resources. The request for the departure of Niger-based directors of China National Petroleum Corporation, the West African Oil Pipeline Company, and the joint venture oil refinery Soraz was communicated Wednesday, the sources said. The Chinese officials were given 48 hours to leave, and one source close to the government said on Friday they were out of the country. The other source, who is close to the affected companies, said the directors were asked to leave because of disputes over pay for local staff and the pace of work on projects. Separately, Niger's tourism ministry last week rescinded the license for a Chinese-operated hotel in Niamey, the capital of Niger, citing discriminatory practices.
I'm Troy Beverly, and this is Pan-African News. Niger expels 3 Chinese oil officials for non-compliance with laws. The Nigerian military government expelled 3 Chinese executives working in the oil industry on Wednesday, March 12, 2025, for failure to comply with the nation's mining code, which prioritizes the use of local goods and services in Niger's mining sector. The 3 expelled Chinese nationals are the directors of the China National Petroleum Corporation, the West African Oil Pipeline Company, and the joint venture oil refinery Soraz. As mentioned by Reuters, the 3 individuals who were given 48 hours to leave the country had departed by Friday. According to AFP, Oil Minister Sahabi Umaru demanded in February that Nigerian executives receive top positions with Soraz while complaining that Nigerian employees were receiving less pay than foreigners. Additionally, the 3 expelled Chinese executives failed to transfer technology to Nigerian employees to enhance local skills. In related news, Niger's tourism Ministry revoked the license of the Chinese-owned Solux International Hotel in the capital Niamey on March 6th for discrimination.
All right, basically a brief paraphrase of what I said. And as you see, our brothers and sisters are on code. They no longer want handouts. They don't want infrastructure projects that don't teach them how to upkeep the infrastructure. They want more control of their resources. And as the title says, respect and relationships, changing dynamics in Africa. Obviously, this Chinese oil company did not respect the sovereignty and culture of the Nigerian people. They were trying to exploit them, but they are no longer having it. They told them to get out, and they did get out, and they had 48 hours. And we see now that more than ever, it's time to start creating initiatives. This one is basically business and critical infrastructure because it has to do with oil and oil pipeline and basically oil to finished products. So you can expand your market in oil and other critical infrastructure endeavors. Just a brief synopsis of the other pillars of our strategy and why we do what we do. We want to make sure our people on the continent can take control of their resources. Not only that, we also want to educate them on how to maintain their resources and expand and basically promote economic development, as I said earlier.
In yet another fearless move that has sent shockwaves through the corridors of Western and Eastern power, Niger's military leader, General Abdurrahmane Chiani, has ordered the immediate expulsion of Chinese corporations from the country. The companies, Soraz, CMPC and WAPCO, have been given exactly 48 hours, starting March 12, 2025, to cease operations and leave Niger's soil. This decision is not arbitrary. It is a necessary step in the fight to restore Niger's economic sovereignty. The government has accused these corporations of blatant disregard for the laws and interests of the Nigerian people. Despite Ordinance Number 2024-34, adopted on August 2, 2024, to ensure Niger's wealth benefits its own citizens, these companies have persistently refused to implement fair wages for local workers, sidelined Nigerian suppliers and contracts, ignored local industries, failed to invest in the training and promotion of Nigerian workers, and deliberately withheld technology transfers that could strengthen national industries. Enough is enough. This move sends a clear message to foreign investors. Niger's resources belong to Nigerians. Investment is welcome, but not at the cost of exploitation and neo-colonial theft. For those who have been paying attention, this is part of a larger revolution unfolding in West Africa. Since taking power, General Chiani has consistently exposed the deep-rooted economic betrayal that existed under the former regime of Mohamed Bazoum. Under Bazoum, Western corporations were granted unrestricted access to Niger's minerals for almost nothing in return. Consider this injustice. Western powers were extracting Niger's uranium at a humiliating 0.80 maz per kilogram while reselling it for $200 per kilogram in global markets. This was nothing less than daylight robbery. But the tide is turning. Just like Burkina Faso and Mali, Niger is taking decisive steps to put an end to the era of foreign exploitation and take full control of its natural wealth. The age of begging for crumbs while sitting on gold is over. What does this mean for the future of Niger and West Africa? How will these bold steps transform the region's economic landscape? Stay with me as we break it all down. And before we continue, hit that like button and subscribe because the fight for African economic liberation needs your voice. And now, let's break it down. For centuries, Africa has been the treasure chest of the world, its soil brimming with gold, diamonds, uranium, cobalt and oil, riches that have fueled the industrial might and economic dominance of the West. Yet, the paradox of Africa's wealth is a bitter one. The continent that holds the keys to global prosperity remains shackled in poverty, its people denied the fruits of their own land. This is not a tale of misfortune, but a deliberate saga of exploitation, orchestrated by Western powers with the complicity or cowardice of African leaders who, for decades, have lacked the spine to say no. From the colonial era to the so-called post-colonial present, the West has mined Africa's resources with impunity, leaving behind crumbs while carting off fortunes. But the winds of change are blowing across the Sahel, where revolutionary leaders in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have risen to reclaim what is rightfully theirs, exposing the naked greed of Western exploitation and sounding a wake-up call to the rest of the continent. The latest salvo in this battle came on March 12, 2025, when Niger's military leader, General Abdurrahmane Tiani, ordered the immediate expulsion of Chinese corporations, SORAS, CMPC, and WAPCO, giving them a mere 48 hours to pack up and leave. This bold move is not just a rejection of foreign domination, it is a beacon of hope, a rallying cry for African leaders to rise from their slumber and take back control. To understand the significance of this moment, we must first peel back the layers of history that have brought us here. The exploitation of Africa's minerals began with the scramble for the continent in the late 19th century, when European powers carved up our lands like a butcher's slab, drawing borders with no regard for our peoples or cultures. The Belgians
He's referring to the
Congo's
Berlin
rubber and
Conference
ivory, the British
of
seized
1865,
Nigeria's oil
I
and
believe
South
is the
Africa's
date.
gold, and the French laid claim to the uranium of Niger and the phosphates of Morocco. This was no partnership. It was theft sanctioned by gunpowder and legitimized by treaties signed under duress. The colonial era may have ended on paper, but its spirit lived on in the neo-colonial arrangements that followed. Sweetheart deals, lopsided contracts, and puppet governments propped up to ensure the uninterrupted flow of Africa's wealth into Western coffers. Take the Democratic Republic of Congo, DRC, for instance, a nation that produces over 60% of the world's cobalt, a mineral critical to the batteries powering electric vehicles and smartphones. Western corporations like Glencore and Tesla have raked in billions, while Congolese miners toil in hellish conditions for less than $1 a day. In Nigeria, Shell and ExxonMobil have extracted oil for decades, polluting the Niger Delta into an ecological wasteland, while the profits vanish into offshore accounts. In Niger itself, France's Orano, formerly Arriva, mined uranium for half a century, powering 1/3 of France's nuclear reactors. Yet Nigerians lived in darkness, with less than 20% of the population enjoying access to electricity. The numbers tell a damning story. Niger sold its uranium to France at 80 cents per kilogram, only for France to turn around and sell it on the global market for £200 per kilogram. €1 billion flowed into Niger's treasury annually, while France pocketed tens of billions. This is not trade, it is robbery by another name. And where were Africa's leaders in all this? Too often, they were silent, or worse, complicit. Seduced by bribes, intimidated by threats, or simply too weak to challenge the status quo, they signed away their nation's futures in boardrooms from Paris to Washington. The West dangled crumbs, roads here, a school there, while extracting the marrow of our economies. The International Monetary Fund and World Bank played their part, imposing structural adjustment programs that forced African governments to privatize their resources, handing them over to Western multinationals under the guise of development. The result? A continent rich in everything but control, its leaders reduced to beggars at the gates of their own inheritance. But history is not static, and Africa's story is far from over. In the Sahel, a new generation of leaders has emerged, unafraid to confront the plunderers and rewrite the script. Burkina Faso's captain Ibrahim Traoré, Mali's Colonel Assimi Goïta, and Niger's General Abdurrahmane Chiani are not your grandfather's politicians. Polished suits and empty promises are not their currency.
All right, that's a long overview of the history, and that channel is Africa is Powerful, very informative, and basically giving you a comprehensive history of what happened in the back then and now what's happening. Niger's actions demonstrate that there is no longer any tolerance for disrespect and incompetency from foreign actors. Furthermore, it's time to start scrutinizing current relationships with foreign countries such as China. Henceforth, Niger sees no benefit in having business relationships with countries that mistreat their citizens and their workers, and does nothing to help expand or train to, like I said, to upkeep and maintain infrastructure. The time for economic oppression and exploitation is over. And now we go to the U.S. U.S. expels South African ambassador. And I will put the article in the chat. Put it in twice. That's my bad. But this is the article, and the article reads: South Africa's ambassador to United States, Ibrahim Rasool, has been declared persona non grata, basically no longer allowed in the country, and is no longer welcome in the country. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced in a rare diplomatic move on Friday. What Donald Trump is launching is an assault on, this is a quote from Rasool, what Donald Trump is launching is an insult on incumbency, basically a duty, those who are in power, by mobilizing a supremacism against the incumbency. I did it. Hooked on Phonics works. At home and abroad. Basically, he's promoting supremacy, the other word that color, supremacy. And he's basically calling Trump's administration supremacist. And, the fragility of this country now on their crimes and what they've done in the past and what they continue to do. They got all mad and they basically kicked him out. And he was the former diplomat from South Africa to America, and Rubio later on accused him of race baiting. Rubio accused him of being a race baiting politician.
It's round 2 of the US versus South Africa battle. Washington has launched another attack. It has expelled South Africa's ambassador to the United States. The ambassador's name is Ibrahim Rasool. His ouster was announced by US Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Rubio called Rasool a race-baiting politician who hates America and hates POTUS. POTUS, of course, stands for President of the United States. So Rubio says the ambassador hates President Donald Trump. This was apparently why he was declared persona non grata and given a few days to leave the US. And like I said, this is just the latest spat between the US and South Africa. Our next report tells you why the two countries are at loggerheads.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio put up this social media post on Friday. He said that South Africa's ambassador to the U.S. was no longer welcome there. Rubio called Ambassador Ibrahim Rasool a race-baiting politician who hates America and hates Donald Trump. Rubio also put up a link to a news article. It has a provocative image where it looks like the ambassador is saying that Trump is leading the global white supremacist movement.
Yes.
He didn't actually say those words. That's just the title of the article. When you click the link, the image has different subtitles. But the article implies the same thing. It says the South African ambassador was addressing a seminar and he told his audience that Donald Trump is leading a white supremacist movement. The article quotes a part of Ambassador Rasool's speech, starting from the middle. The ambassador said some things before the part that was quoted, which could provide more context. The speech is free for everyone to see online. But Rubio probably doesn't care about that. The particular article's interpretation gave him a reason to expel the South African diplomat. Reports say that Rasul wasn't a popular figure in Washington because of his criticism of Israel, his pro-Palestine stance, and his alleged past criticism of Donald Trump. So it seems Rasul had a target on his back, and his recent speech was just the excuse Rubio needed to expel him. South Africa noted the expulsion. Pretoria called it regrettable, but said that it remains committed to building a mutually beneficial relationship with the United States of America. So it sounds like South Africa will not retaliate. Rasul's expulsion is just the latest salvo in the growing spat between the US and South Africa. Last month, Trump signed this executive order, halting all US aid to South Africa. Washington accused Pretoria of treating its Afrikaner minority with shocking disregard and trying to seize their property without compensation. This has not happened. South Africa just updated a law from the 1970s. The updated bill could allow South Africa's government to seize land under exceptional circumstances, but the Trump administration believes that the new law is unjust and immoral, so they cut aid to South Africa. That isn't all. Rubio also boycotted a G20 meet in South Africa last month. He repeated the false charge that Pretoria was expropriating private property. And he said South Africa was using G20 to promote DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Trump and his team are dead against DEI, so Rubio said he would not attend the G20 meeting. It seems like Washington is spoiling for a fight with Pretoria. But the South African government keeps trying to diffuse tensions. One explanation for this could be a critical trade deal. The African Growth and Opportunity Act. This deal lets sub-Saharan countries, including South Africa, sell some goods to the US duty-free. The deal is a boon for South African exports, so they don't want to get kicked off the program. But that doesn't mean that Pretoria is happy about all of this. So it may be looking for other trading partners.
This summit is taking place at a time of global uncertainty. Global uncertainty, which we spoke a little bit about in our tete-a-tete, which is characterized by rising unilateralism, economic nationalism, and a retreat from what we've always wanted to advance, which is adherence to international law, a world order that seeks to advance all nations, which is also departing from what we would call human rights culture.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa met with a European Union delegation last week.
All right, I'm going to cut it right there because that's literally the next story. But yeah, South Africa is going to have to cut ties with America. I don't know why they want to continue doing strategic relationships with America when they don't respect their own sovereignty completely. What's the word? They completely, misalign and, completely lie about this new Land Expropriation Act, which I'm sure some of you already know the intricacies of it. It's basically a law to help reclaim land that 90% of white South Africans own, which they got from exploitation and slavery and colonialism. Basically, the whites in South Africa amount to 10% of the population, but they own 90% of the land. So that's what that law is about. And, I don't know how they can continue to have diplomatic ties with America when they keep on misrepresenting what they're trying to do and their own sovereignty.
Let's start, in fact, with what led to all of this. The U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, saying that South Africa's ambassador to the U.S. is no longer welcome in that country. In a post on X, Rubio accused Ibrahim Rasool of being a race-baiting politician who hates America and also basically said does not like Donald Trump over remarks he had made during an online speech about foreign policy. So Nick Harper, our correspondent, has more from Washington on that.
Well, normally in these type of situations when an ambassador is deemed to be a persona non grata, that is something that takes immediate effect. It is unclear exactly how quickly he would be expected to leave the country, but the implicit implication in all of this that it is as soon as possible. Now, it's not normally the case that ambassador would be frog marched to the airport and put on the next available plane home. But the expectation is that essentially relations between that ambassador and the country that they've been living in is severed almost as quickly as is possible. So there is a chance that he will have to clear out of the residency in Washington during the course of this weekend and head home. We don't have an exact time frame of how all of this will play out, but from the United States point of view, this statement from the Secretary of State is final. There is no suggestion that they will back down from this. It is the ultimate in terms of diplomatic relations, in terms of diplomatic endings, this statement being very much the final word from the US administration. Marco Rubio also in that statement making it clear that the US had no further the things that it would be willing to discuss with the ambassador as part of considering him now a persona non grata.
Nick, thank you very much indeed. Meanwhile, South Africa's presidency saying it's noted the expulsion of South Africa's ambassador to that country, of course, that being Ibrahim Rasool. You saw that post by the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, him basically saying that the ambassador was no longer welcome in the United States of America. In that post by Rubio, in case you've not seen it, he basically accused Rasool of hating America. And as I said in our earlier story, of hating President Donald Trump. Let's take a listen to what the presidential spokesperson here in South Africa, Vincent Magwenya, had to say.
The presidency has noted the regrettable expulsion of South Africa's ambassador to the United States of America, Mr. Ibrahim Rasool. All relevant and impacted stakeholders to maintain the established decorum in their engagement with the matter. Remains committed to building a mutually beneficial relationship with the United States of America.
Well, the presidency spokesperson, Vincent Magwenya, there on the latest. All right, we're going to be joined now by SABC News International News Editor Sophie Magwenya. She's joining us on the line now. An interesting couple of hours of developments, Sophie, if we take a look at that tweet by Marco Rubio. And this is, of course, on the backdrop of these reported statements that were made by Ibrahim Rasool. Talk to us about, first of all, the tone that we see in the tweet or in the X of the Secretary of State of the United States of America.
Well, the tone is clear. It's the expulsion of the ambassador in the United States of America. In other words, a clear message that he has to leave the country immediately. And we have since learned that he was called in at the State Department and he was told to leave within 72 hours. We are still trying to get hold of the ambassador to verify this information. But as you heard earlier on from that report, Nick Harper in Washington, indicating that this is an immediate action and it has to be that directive implemented with immediate effect. It's not like he was called in for questioning. He has been declared undesirable person in the United States of America based on those facts that the Secretary of State has pointed out to. And I think, therefore, it kind of make the relations to be more complicated and tense because it is the expulsion of a face of the country in a foreign country, a representative of a country outside South Africa. You know, an ambassador represent the country, he does also represent the president, and therefore it is a highest form of reaction or retaliation when you expel an ambassador or a senior diplomat.
Yeah. And recall, President Cyril Ramaphosa had indicated that there were envoys, that will be sent, to different countries, including the United States of America, to basically give clarity on, the Land Expropriation Act. That has not yet happened, Sophie. Now, given where we are, what should the president be taking into account when he constitutes this convoy, this envoy, I beg your pardon, which must now go to a country like the United States where such drastic measures have now already been taken?
He has to consider many issues when he does that. One, he must look at credible people, people who can really be diplomatic, because it is a diplomatic mission, people with sound and experienced diplomacy, people who have served at the highest level of government because they have experience. It must be people with trade relations experience. It must be people who will represent the real face of South Africa. It must be people who will also be able to articulate the foreign policy.
All right, you can watch the rest of that video, but I have, someone on the ground, my brother Karabo, who lives in South Africa, and his comment says, this has divided the country to some extent. The majority want to maintain the relationship with Babylon, whilst others are waking up to the fact that we don't need the US for anything. That is interesting, and I hope the divide is further and most South Africans realize that they do not need the United States, that they don't need the besmirchment of their country, if that is a word, but basically they don't need America continually giving them bad press and, again, misconveying their laws, their sovereignty, and their own government. I mean, they should take notes from the Alliance of Sahel States. The Alliance of Sahel States kicked out all Western news media outlets that kept on lying about what they were doing to their citizens, and they took control of their own press and took control of their own media and only allow certain media outlets in their country. That's why I'm not going to say it's hard, but you just got to dig deep to find news articles about what's happening on the continent, because the West really doesn't want you to know what's going on in West Africa. And this, I'm not going to say it's an uprising. It's just what is always been prophesied, that eventually our brothers and sisters on the continent would wake up, as we are waking up and realizing the power of strategic relationships between the African diaspora and the African continent. The diplomatic affairs and cultural engagement of the United States with Africa continues to crumble. America's dominance continues to dwindle, and their interactions with other countries conveys loss of power. Furthermore, their only recourse is to continue to impose tariffs and excommunicate countries that tell the truth about their supremacist nature. Instead of reforming from the neocolonialism and supremacist ideologies, they continue to double down with hubris. America is a sinking empire that will not rethink its strategic relationships with African countries and repent from past crimes it's committed. Therefore, they will lose out on resources from the continent. Next story. EU announces South Africa investment after US aid cut. So now you see the European Union is trying to cut ties diplomatically with other Western nations such as America. They don't want to be a part of this America's wave of just disrespecting the continent. They still see the benefit in dealing with the African nations because obviously they need resources for their energy, for their technologies. So they're not going to completely, do away with dealing with the continent. And they are, whether it's, genuine or not, they still see the value in diplomatically dealing with Africa, in this instance, South Africa. And again, as Brother Caribou said, pretty soon, South Africa needs to realize that they should just stop dealing with these foreign countries and entities and start dealing with African leaders and African countries to start developing strategic relationships. Let me see. South Africa's government needs to be renewed from the ground up, just like Burkina Faso. They have been recycling the same boule within different parts of government for decades now. That's what I see, Brother Caribou. But thank you for giving a testimony, as you are currently living in South Africa and born there, so you know exactly what's going on. And the article states the European Union will invest $4.7 billion in South Africa to support various projects, including the clean energy transition, vaccine manufacturing, and digital and physical connectivity. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced Thursday. The announcement was made at a summit between the EU and South Africa aimed at strengthening bilateral ties. It comes shortly after the U.S. withdrew financial assistance to Pretoria amid a diplomatic row. So what I see is the EU may just cut ties with America altogether, and they will appease the African continent and the African leaders, and maybe they will, what's the word I'm saying? I'm thinking of, excuse me. Maybe the EU will meet the demands of Africans and will no longer exploit them, and they're going to completely cut ties with America. That's what I see. And if you all read the good book, that's what is prophesied to happen. And I will play the video.
The European Union has announced almost 5 billion euros of investment in South Africa. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen unveiled the plans to support green energy and vaccine production during a visit to Cape Town. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa said the bilateral summit comes at a time of economic nationalism, referring to tariffs imposed by U.S. President Donald Trump. Von der Leyen said the EU was eager to deepen its relationship with South Africa.
Today, we are together announcing an investment package to mobilize 4.7 billion euro in South Africa, and this is in both our interest. It includes funding for the clean energy transition, but also funding to boost vaccine manufacturing. South Africa wants to protect the health of its people as well as your autonomy and your local industries. We Europeans want to diversify some of our most critical supply chains, and we know that viruses know no borders. So that is what I call a true mutual interest.
DW's Diane Hawker has been covering the summit for us in Cape Town, and here is what she told us about it.
This SA-EU summit has been 7 years in the making, and it does seem that the current global political situation has been a strong motivator for this meeting. South Africa and the European Union were at pains to stress that they will go and forge a strong partnership. And part of the reason behind this partnership will be that both organizations believe strongly in multilateralism as well as support for human rights. Now, the center of this partnership will be a focus on the just energy transition, with the European Union saying that it will make available 4.7 billion euro to assist South African companies with the just energy transition. South Africa has the minerals, the European Union has the know-how, and they believe that a partnership will see both entities using their different skills to boost the energy transition to clean, green.
Okay, so from what I know, South Africa has load shedding and has problems with their infrastructure and their but more succinctly their energy infrastructure, where at times there's something called load shedding where they have to take the power off in order to keep the grid running. Brother Carabo, please let me, please fill in the details where I may have, been inaccurate. But from my understanding, South Africa still is trying to get resources. Well, they have the resources, not the resources. They're still trying to implement measures so they can have clean energy and they can do away with load shedding, because it's inconvenient to have your power off for a certain amount of time. And the government has implemented this policy of load shedding where, again, like I said, they have to take off the power or taper it so that the grid continues to keep going. But again, why are they looking to the EU? Why can't South Africa look within the African Union or look in with, see different models from different African nations that have better energy infrastructure and do partnerships with them, or just, have, different people from the diaspora help them with their energy infrastructure, basically technological innovation and critical infrastructure. I could see that happening. The EU will, say all these things and say, well, they're going to help. But with the past interactions and past relationships with European countries and Africa, how can they still continue to rely upon that? And as some of you have stated, Africa, America needs Africa way more than Africa needs America. Same thing with Europe. They need Africa more than Africa needs them.
European Union leaders have announced about a 93 billion rand investment package in South Africa to support green energy transition and vaccine production. Yesterday, European Union leaders were in Cape Town for the first South Africa-European Union summit since 2018. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says the investment is mutually beneficial for Europe and South Africa. Now, both South Africa and the EU are grappling with aid and trade issues as US President Donald Trump withdraws assistance and imposes tariffs. To look at significance of the summit, we are joined by the head of the African Governance and Diplomacy Program at the South African Institute of International Affairs, Stephen Gross. Stephen, thank you for joining us. Great to have you.
Great. Thanks for having me, Leanne.
I mean, this is really an opportune time, I imagine, for refreshing the relationship between South Africa and the European Union. I mean, even while the summit was happening, we heard the US President Donald Trump firing shots at the EU, now imposing like 200% tariff increases on wines and champagnes or whatever the case may be. So this is a very, very important time.
Yes, indeed. I think both South Africa and the European Union have been on the wrong end of Trump's rhetoric and his very frenetic activity in the first 50 days or so of him taking office. And indeed, you know, South Africa has been in his sights, and there's been the withdrawal of aid, and Europe has also similarly been the target of Trump, especially on defense, saying that they need to pay more for defense and not rely so heavily on the United States to defend them, as has been the case for the last 80 years. So he's really turned things on their head quite quickly.
Yeah.
And when his executive order against South Africa came out a few weeks ago, the Europeans were quick to support South Africa, to support our presidency of the G20, and that it all goes smoothly. So I think within the global realignments and what's happening, this is an important summit. It's an important photo opportunity and an opportunity for South Africa and the EU to cement their ties and you know, do what's best for the two regions.
And very importantly so, because I mean, I imagine that on both sides, as we see this United States tariff war happening, and it's with everybody, but we as a country can fill a lot of those gaps. I mean, when you sort of see that you know, the products on offer on this side and also from the EU side, you know, it's important to look elsewhere, and I think that is what the US president is actually forcing the world to do.
Yes, everybody's diversifying. They're having to find new supply chains, new customers, new investment. I think South Africa has been a big proponent of South-South trade with other developing countries. This, of course, is South-North. But nevertheless, the European Union is our largest trading partner, taken as a bloc, larger than China. And once you have already a steady stream of trade, it's much easier to build on that and to increase it. So indeed, South Africa will be looking to diversify its sources of products, of materials, of clients, and the European Union presents a very good market. It's not always easy to get into it. For example, we've had a lot of problems over the years with our citrus, with black spot disease, and many say that the European health standards are too stringent and are in fact trade barriers. So there are things that need to be worked out. But yes, Europe is a very lucrative and attractive market for South Africa, and I think the other way around as well.
Very importantly. So let's have a look and see what some of the nitty-gritties that came out.
All right, I don't want this to be redundant. You can look at the rest of the video. I disagree. South Africa should just take its ball and go home and play with their African brothers and sisters. The EU is making a strategic effort to help South Africa due to the tariffs from the United States. Furthermore, they see an opportunity to make a commitment to South Africa to still have access to African resources. I believe that the EU is trying to disavow ties with America as a signal to Africa that they are not like the United States. However, I'm skeptical about their motives and if they want to foster a beneficial relationship with Africa. EU has a past of disrespecting African sovereignty and exploiting the continent. This is more of a diplomatic optic to help them restore their image in the face of Western influence dwindling. Rwanda cuts ties with Belgium, orders diplomats to leave. See, so you see a trend. Africa is no longer allowing interlopers, invaders, colonialists, whatever superlative or adjective I could think of in their country. And I will put the article in the chat. Rwanda said Monday it had given Belgian diplomats 48 hours. That number keeps popping up to leave the country after cutting ties with Brussels. Belgium has consistently undermined Rwanda both well before and during the ongoing conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the DRC. in which Belgium has a deep and violent historical role, especially in acting against Rwanda. Belgium recently froze aid and suspended trade agreements over Kigali's aggression in neighboring DRC. Kagame, the president of Rwanda, signaled out Belgium, which ruled Rwanda as a colony until 1962, saying it had committed atrocities against Rwandans, vowing to fight back against its neo-colonial interference. Kigali has faced increased international scrutiny over its role in the conflict in eastern Congo, where its proxy rebel force controls two resource-rich provinces. Rwanda's Ministry of Foreign Affairs claims that Belgium has led an aggressive campaign with the DRC to sabotage Rwanda's development funding, describing the move as external interference which undermines African-led mediation process to resolve the crisis in eastern DRC. The ministry stressed that development partnerships must be based on mutual respect and that Rwanda will not be bullied or blackmailed into compromising national security. So basically, if you are up to date on the conflict in the Congo, which is very complex and has very many intricacies, basically King Leopold has, that was the king who basically came into the Congo and completely, brutalized it and took its minerals and its resources. And they've had a foothold since then, back since the Berlin Conference of 1865. And now Belgium is trying to make Rwanda the bad guy and trying to mediate different measures in the DRC because they are neighboring the DRC, and they're also Rwandans and, different people, groups and tribes that share borders with the DRC and Rwanda. I remember watching Hotel Rwanda and how that conflict was stoked by Belgium and different foreign actors. So they're saying enough is enough because it is, affecting their own image on the continent. And, this should be an African matter. There shouldn't be foreign entities trying to, mediate this conflict because it's none of their business and they're only doing it so they can still have access to those minerals and resources in the Congo.
Rwanda said Monday it had given Belgian diplomats 48 hours to leave the country after cutting ties with Brussels. In a statement, Kigali's Foreign Affairs Ministry accused Belgium of interference. Belgium recently froze aid and suspended trade agreements over Kigali's aggression in neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo. In a press conference in Kigali Sunday, Rwanda's President Paul Kagame struck a defiant tone, saying the East African country would defend its interests against interference by foreign countries. Kagame singled out Belgium, which ruled Rwanda as a colony until 1962, saying it had committed atrocities against Rwandans, vowing to fight back against what he called neo-colonial interference. Kigali has faced increased international scrutiny over its role in the conflict in eastern Congo, where its proxy rebel force controls two resource-rich provinces.
Rwanda has given Belgium diplomats 48 hours to leave the country, cutting ties with Brussels completely because Belgium has consistently, they say, undermined Rwanda. Rwandans are accusing Belgians of accusing them to be involved in what's happening in the Congo. You can go find out about it. America bombed the Houthis in Yemen. The Houthis bombed American ships back. This is something you've never seen before. Donald Trump says he's going to unleash hell on these people, and he's going to punish Iran as well if he continues to give Houthis weapons they are using right now. South African presidency has expressed its regret over the expulsion of its ambassador. You know, they didn't push back by saying, take your ambassador back. They say, we regret. Fellas, I think the ability to see disrespect from miles away is much better than putting somebody back in his place after they disrespect you. I think greatness is that ability to actually repair, notice, point out to somebody, see that guy right there is bringing disrespect. That lady over there, let me not pray. Yeah. You know, sometimes some people, you don't play with them. You don't make jokes with them. I remember one time going to a petrol station as they were filling up my car, because in Africa, you get somebody to actually fill up your car. It's not necessarily self-service like you see in many other countries. You park your car and somebody's filling up your car, and you run inside the shop to go buy some cold drinks, some cakes and stuff. I was hungry. So I got to the pay station, and there was a few ladies, you know, selling and stuff, Africans, and you're trying to be nice. You're trying to be kind. Say, hey, how you doing? How's your day? You look tired. I hope you're going to go rest and stuff like that. So I left. They were laughing, ha ha ha. You know. So some other day I came back and I found some people standing there in front of me. When my turn came, the lady I had spoken to the other day looked at me and said, oh, so you there, you're going to pass me like you didn't see me. I'm like, what? No, so you there, you're going to act like you don't know me, or, you know, you're just going to buy and pay and leave. I knew exactly what had occurred. There was a lack of respect. Why? Because I was nice to her. So in Rwanda said on Monday it had given Belgian diplomat 48 hours to leave the country and cutting up ties with Brussels. Yes, Rwanda at it with Brussels. They don't get along at all right now. So in a statement, Kigali foreign minister accused Belgium of interference. They say Belgium has consistently undermined Rwanda, both well before and during the ongoing conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo, in which Belgium has deep and violent historical role, especially in acting against Rwanda. So Belgium recently froze aid and suspended trade agreement over Kigali's aggression in neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo. So basically, Belgium is accusing Rwanda of being part of the mayhem that's happening in the Congo. Belgium is accusing Rwanda of being part of the mayhem in the Congo. So they asked Belgian diplomats to leave the country. Belgium also declared Rwandan diplomats persona non grata, meaning they've lost their status in the country. They have to leave. Usually you have like 48 hours to leave the country. So they're going at each other, and that's what it is. And now we're going to Yemen. Here's Yemen, fellas. So the United States of America and Yemens are going at each other. That's what it is. Now, in that side of the sea, you find a few American carriers with airplanes. They are based there just for showing strength. And this time around.
So basically, a brief overview. Rwanda is now forced to kick out Belgium influence because now the effects of colonialism is destroying their nation. Furthermore, this conflict has diminished Rwandan sovereignty and cultural engagement between their neighboring African borders. Rwanda's economic development and critical infrastructure is in jeopardy due to foreign entities intervening. Therefore, they no longer want them in their country. And this is part of a cultural engagement effort to get rid of, you know, people who are, again, lying about your country, lying about your lying on your sovereignty, and lying on how you, just lying on the history and just rewriting it and, you know, making their own story to help continue their exploitation of the Congo and Rwandans as well. Okay. Next article. There's a few articles that I used for this one. I'll put them in the chat. Okay. Niger withdraws from International Organization of La Francophonie. Niger announced on Monday its withdrawal from the International Organization La Francophonie. The decision was revealed in a note from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs addressed to countries' diplomatic missions abroad. Also, the the Malayan Ministry of Foreign Affairs stated that the country could not remain a member of an organization whose actions are incompatible with its constitutional principles, which are based on state sovereignty. This decision follows similar moves by Burkina Faso and Niger, who, like Mali, have military regimes and have broken ties with France in favor of sovereignty. The three nations, founding members of the OIF, condemned the organization of selectively applying sanctions and undermining their sovereignty, calling it a politically motivated tool. The La Francophonie refers to the global community of French-speaking people, and the international organization, just basically a bureaucratic agency to make sure French influence remains. The Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie, which promotes the French language and cultural diversity and cooperation amongst its member states. Basically, an organization to make sure its vassal states are adhering to the organization's French colonial imperialist culture and tactics, etc., etc.
In a seismic shift that has sent shockwaves through the corridors of Western power, particularly in France, Niger has formally withdrawn from the International Organization of La Francophonie, OIF, the global coalition of French-speaking nations long seen as a linchpin of France's cultural and political dominance in Africa. This audacious move, announced on Monday by Niger's ruling military junta, follows in the revolutionary footsteps of Mali and Burkina Faso, two Sahelian nations that have similarly severed ties with this vestige of colonial hegemony. Together, these nations are not merely rejecting a linguistic club, they are dismantling the scaffolding of French neocolonialism, a system that has for decades exploited Africa's wealth, suppressed its sovereignty, and manipulated its people under the guise of linguistic unity. For too long, the French language has been wielded as a Trojan horse, a seemingly benign gift that concealed the sinister intent of control and plunder. Niger's exit from La Francophonie is not just a symbolic gesture, it is a clarion call to African nations to reclaim their dignity, their resources, and their destiny from the clutches of a former colonial master that refuses to let go. As the winds of change sweep across the Sahel, the West, and France in particular, watches with bated breath, its carefully curated influence crumbling under the weight of a resurgent Pan-African spirit. Niger's decision comes as no surprise to those who have followed the rising tide of anti-French sentiment across West Africa. Mali, under the leadership of Colonel Assimi Goïta, was the first to strike a blow against this linguistic imperialism, downgrading French from its status as an official language in 2022 and pivoting toward local languages as a cornerstone of national identity. Burkina Faso, led by the youthful and defiant Captain Ibrahim Traoré, followed suit, relegating French to a mere working language in a bold constitutional overhaul that signalled a break from Paris's cultural stranglehold. Now Niger, under General Abdourahmane Chiani, has taken this rebellion to the international stage, formally exiting La Francophonie and aligning itself with its Sahelian sisters in a united front against French influence. This trio of nations, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, has not only rejected the linguistic yoke, but has also forged a new path through the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, a pact that prioritizes sovereignty, mutual defense, and economic independence over the hollow promises of Western-led institutions like ECOWAS and the G5 Sahel, both of which have been tainted by French fingerprints. Their withdrawal from La Francophonie is a rejection of the notion that Africa's future must be dictated by the language of its former oppressors. It is a declaration that the continent's destiny lies in the hands of its people, not in the boardrooms of Paris or the halls of the Élysée Palace. The timing of Niger's exit is particularly poignant. Just months ago, the country expelled French troops from its soil, ending a decades-long military presence that had done little to stem the tide of insecurity while extracting vast quantities of uranium, fueling France's nuclear ambitions at a pittance of its true value. Burkina Faso and Mali, too, have ousted French forces, turning instead to partnerships with Russia and other nations willing to respect their autonomy. This trifecta of resistance is a testament to the growing consciousness among Africa's youth, who see through the facade of French benevolence and demand a future free from exploitation. To understand the significance of this moment, we must peel back the layers of history and expose the French language for what it has been in Africa: a weapon of manipulation, a tool of psychological subjugation, and a gateway to resource plunder.
Side note, I remember literally trying to get back home for Burkina Faso, and all the people spoke French. And there was one sister that spoke a little bit of English and helped me out. Thanks, to the Most High. But, I will never forget one of the workers there. Look, he's like, I don't even remember what he said in the French language, but I told him I don't speak French, and he looked at me like I had 7 heads. It was pretty bad. That's how bad they have, brainwashed our people into thinking that the French language is theirs and it's something to be a badge of honor, or like some sophisticated thing. All right, side note over.
When France colonized vast swathes of Africa in the 19th and early 20th centuries, it did not merely impose its flag, it imposed its tongue. The French language was forced upon African societies, eradicating indigenous dialects, rewriting histories, and reshaping identities to serve the colonial project. Education systems were designed to produce a class of African elites fluent in French, loyal to Paris, and alienated from their own people, a strategy that ensured the continent remained tethered to its colonizer long after the tricolour was lowered. La Francophonie, established in 1970, was the natural extension of this linguistic imperialism. Marketed as a celebration of shared culture and cooperation, it was in reality a mechanism to perpetuate French influence in a post-independence era. Through this organization, France maintained a grip on the political, economic, and cultural levers of its former colonies, using the French language as a litmus test for loyalty. To speak French was to be civilized, to be modern, to be worthy of aid and investment, or so the narrative went. But beneath this veneer of camaraderie lay a darker truth. The language was a conduit for control, a means to keep Africa dependent and its resources accessible. Consider the CFA franc, the currency still used by 14 African nations, pegged to the euro and managed by the French treasury. This monetary shackle, enforced in Francophone Africa, ensures that billions in reserves are deposited in Paris, generating profits for France while stifling economic sovereignty in Africa. The French language has been the glue holding this exploitative system together, a common thread linking puppet regimes, corrupt elites, and extractive corporations to their benefactors in France. By rejecting La Francophonie, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso are not just abandoning a language, they are challenging the entire architecture of neo-colonialism that it sustains. Nowhere is France's exploitation more evident than in the plunder of Africa's minerals, a practice facilitated by its linguistic and political dominance. Niger, for instance, is one of the world's leading producers of uranium, a critical...
Okay, you could check out that video. Did I put the link in there? No, not just yet. Give me a second. Where is it? Again, yes, Brother Greg. This is basically, slavery of the mind, basically taking on a culture and a language that was never yours and being so closely identified to it to the point where you've almost forgotten who you were. I think we've all experienced that, you know, the diaspora and the African continent, but it is no longer allowed. We are waking up to it and we are taking back what is ours. Give me 1 second. I'm trying to put this link for that video in the chat and then read what I wrote for this. And again, that channel's Africa is Powerful, one of the best sources of news and what is going on the continent. Fair use, fair use. Oops, whatever. Let me read the notes that I had for the last article. The Sahel continues to display how the continent as a whole should cut ties from colonialism and antiquated, basically, you know, outdated strategic relationships. Their cultural engagement strategy is to restore nationalism and sovereignty. Furthermore, restoring cultural norms can only be done by cutting ties with past colonial oppressors. And I'll even go further. It is needed to get rid of colonial languages and histories in order to free the minds of future generations so they feel heard and they come together and formulate ways of how they can restore nationalism and sovereignty. This is about the future generations and the youth. Some people may be lost in colonialism and may have been brainwashed to the point where they can't be redeemed, unfortunately. But we do this for the future generations that will break the chains off and restore order and balance. Okay, and the last article, Togo, how the country's possible membership in the Alliance of Sahel States will affect ECOWAS. And this is more like, well, this is similar to like a little blog or article because, again, the West doesn't want you to know what's going on in Africa. And it says, recent events in West Africa indicate a possible change in geopolitical environment in the region. One of the most notable signals is Togo's hint that it is considering the possibility of joining the Alliance of Sahel States, which could be a turning point in the history of the region and precursor to the collapse of Economic Community of West African States, also known as ECOWAS. The trend towards closer alignment with the alliance is also evident among neighboring countries such as Senegal and Ghana, which, like Togo, are landlocked. Basically, they're not by the sea, but Togo is. And I will remember I had a layover in Togo and I saw the beach in Togo and the coast, and it was like one of the most beautiful scenes I've seen in my life. And also, I don't know, just my own, I don't know, just my like DNA and like my own like subconscious thoughts and epigenetics kicked in as to, wow, this is where my ancestors were, and this is where they were taken from, because again, Benin, Togo, that area used to be Negro land. And if you look further into Benin and Togo, that area was the slave coast where they took the slaves from. And for my people and us who are awakened, we know that is where our ancestors had that land known as Weta land or Yuta land, or, you know, read in between the lines, because this is Q2. I'm not going to go further, but you all get the picture. Those of you who know. The trend, oh, I read that already. This creates the potential for a trade, economic strengthening, emphasized that his country was considering joining the AES, calling it a historic moment for the region. And basically, this will, you know, strengthen the AES, because they'll have another country that has ports and is close to the sea, and they can export and import goods more seamlessly.
ECOWAS has suffered yet another unexpected blow as Togo, a key West African nation, signals its intention to break ranks and join the Alliance of Sahel States, AES. This move follows the dramatic exit of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, who accused ECOWAS.
Wait, I hope, did you all just hear what I just said? Because I thought it was pretty profound, and I hope you heard it. Well, basically what I said was, when I was in Togo, I saw the layover, and I knew the history. That's where we were taken from, the slave coast. And basically that's where our ancestors set up shop. If you look on the map of Negro land, you will see whose land was there and who was there. And basically all of us are kinsmen, and basically all of us who are scattered to the four corners of the earth. Our land was in that region, Benin and Togo. Our tribe set up land, and you know what land I'm talking about, our ancestor and who we are. They set up that land. If you look up the Negro land map, you will see that is where that region is, Benin and Togo, and who was there previously before they renamed it. And basically Togo being an important partner if they do join the AES, because they have access to ports and the ocean, and that will help trade, strengthen trade. That's what I said, because I didn't realize I was on mute. And like I said, I saw the coast of Togo, and something inside me said, yes, this is where my ancestors once stepped foot and were taken from. Okay, let me play the video and end the show, because I'm ranting right now.
Of serving Western interests rather than prioritizing African sovereignty. Togo, a coastal nation and long-standing ECOWAS member, is now seriously considering aligning itself with the AES, a move that could reshape the balance of power in the region. Togolese Foreign Minister Robert Dussey has publicly confirmed the country's intention to join the alliance, which was formed in the wake of the 3 Sahelian states breaking away from ECOWAS. Togo is considering joining the AES, a strategic decision that could reshape regional cooperation and provide access to the sea for member countries, Dussey stated on social media. This statement marks a pivotal moment in West African politics. Togo's potential membership in the AES could significantly bolster the bloc, granting landlocked Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger access to maritime trade routes, an economic game changer. Furthermore, it signals a growing shift among African nations seeking greater self-determination, free from external influence. Togo's potential defection from ECOWAS raises pressing questions. Why is Togo seeking to align with the AES? Will the alliance accept its membership? What does this mean for the future of West African integration? Stay tuned as we dig deeper into this shifting political landscape. Before we continue, hit that like and subscribe buttons for more eye-opening content. And now, let's get into it. The Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, once heralded as a beacon of regional unity and economic integration in West Africa, is crumbling under the weight of its own contradictions. The exit of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, three foundational members of the bloc, on January 29, 2025, has exposed the fragility of an organization accused of bending to Western interests at the expense of African sovereignty. This seismic shift, dubbed Sahel exit by some, has not only weakened ECOWAS, but also ignited a broader conversation about the future of regional cooperation in Africa. Now Togo, a coastal nation still tethered to ECOWAS, is contemplating a bold move, joining the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, the new bloc formed by Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. As a Pan-Africanist, I see this moment as a clarion call, a rejection of neo-colonial shackles and a reclamation of African agency. The departure of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger from ECOWAS was not a mere tantrum by military juntas. It was a calculated act of defiance against an organization they accused of being a puppet of Western powers, particularly France and its allies. Their formation of the AES in September 2023, followed by their formal withdrawal from ECOWAS in 2025, has laid bare the fault lines within the bloc, a disconnect between its lofty ideals and its failure to address the existential crises of its member states. Togo's flirtation with the AES is the latest symptom of ECOWAS's decline, and a testament to the allure of a new vision for African unity rooted in self-reliance and mutual defense. Founded in 1975, ECOWAS was envisioned as a vehicle for economic integration and political stability, a Pan-African dream of collective prosperity free from the meddling hands of former colonial powers. For decades, it stood as a symbol of West African resilience, weathering coups, civil wars, and economic upheavals. Yet, beneath its glossy veneer of unity lay a troubling reality. ECOWAS had become a tool for perpetuating Western dominance. The bloc's response to the military coups in Mali 2020, Burkina Faso 2022, and Niger 2023 exposed its allegiance to external masters. Swift sanctions, threats of military intervention, and a refusal to engage in meaningful dialogue with the juntas revealed an organization more concerned with pleasing Paris and Washington than addressing the root causes of instability, terrorism, poverty, and governance failures. The Sahel Trio's grievances were clear. In their joint statement announcing their exit, they lamented that ECOWAS had drifted from the ideals of its founding fathers and the spirit.
Again, don't want to be redundant, but it's always good to be reminded of the history and what was once the case and how we got here now. And let me put the link in chat. And again, like I said, ECOWAS is losing its power, and our brothers and sisters realize respect and relationship, the importance of respect, of sovereignty and culture when it comes to strategic relationships, and now they are taking action. Okay, that's all I have. Everyone, enjoy your weekend, enjoy your Shabbat, and Shabbat Shalom. Let me know how I can improve the show and what you like about it. Please give me feedback. That is welcomed, and I will put the Quest to Unite Africa website. Please donate, please volunteer. Everything you contribute to Quest to Unite Africa helps us grow and expand and push our mission further. And thank you all for tuning in. And again, Shabbat Shalom.